Hello there. Russell Goodman, Supply Chain Brain, Senior Editor here, welcoming you to our presentation today. It's titled, Safeguard Your Cargo in a Disrupted Supply Chain. You're living it, so you know today's global supply chain faces a new wave of destabilization, marked by a freight recession and historically low rates. Uncertainty is compounded by the persistent threat of global conflict. And as if that isn't bad enough, throw in an imminent surge in nearshoring and upsurge in cross-border freight movement, market upheavals, and bankruptcies of small and large carriers and brokers. Well, it's hardly a pretty picture because all of this hurts profit margins and results in toxicity throughout the supply chain. Well, fortunately, there is a disinfectant for it all. Real-time item-level shipment visibility. Well, today we're going to delve into the ripple effect of supply chain destabilization, how it magnifies risk in your day-to-day freight operations. We'll show that adopting the right visibility technology will help you stay ahead of the curve and effectively minimize risks by providing you continuous knowledge of your cargo's exact location and condition. The takeaways? Well, how about this? Understanding the comprehensive scope of increased risk in a destabilized supply chain market, ranging from cargo theft and cross-border security concerns to questionable cost-cutting measures employed by brokers and carriers. The importance of not only diversifying your carrier network, but also holding them accountable for their performance, and how real-time shipment visibility can ensure business continuity and empower you to measure, monitor, and mitigate risk effectively. Well, to illustrate all of this for us today, Richie Daigle, Enterprise Account Executive at Tide. Now, with extensive experience in the transportation and supply chain data visibility space, from podcast host to blog writer to all-around industry resource, Richie brings innumerable benefits to Tive. Prior to Tive, however, Richie was the Sonar Enterprise Account Executive at FreightWaves, where he was, by the way, the only account executive to meet quota 2 years in a row. Also with us today, Kevin Hill, owner of Brush Pass Research, a sales and marketing research firm that helps companies sell to freight brokerages across North America. Kevin has more than 10 years in the freight industry, both as a sales executive and as a media producer. He also hosts Put That Coffee Down, a freight sales show on FreightWaves TV. Well, previously, Kevin founded Carrier Lists, a carrier sourcing platform that was acquired by Highway in 2022. A truly valuable presentation is just ahead. But before we get underway, just a word about the Q&A session that's going to follow the presentation. You participate by filling in the box at the bottom of your screen with your question. Our experts will address as many as possible before we sign off. Any questions still pending at the close of the show, they will get to offline. All right, now to our presentation and to Richie Daigle of Tive and Kevin Hill of Brush Pass Research. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks, Russell. I really appreciate the intro there and excited about this conversation. I think to properly understand where we are currently in the current situation that we're facing, the current freight recession that we're all seeing, it's good to understand what led us to this place. How do we get here? Just a few years ago, we were speaking about very different types of problems, right? Where the market was quite the opposite of what it is today. There were bottlenecks everywhere. There were ships that were piling up off the coast of Los Angeles and all around the world. There wasn't enough capacity for the demand of freight that was out there, and people weren't spending money on Disney World and and going out to movies and bars. They were buying anything and everything online and doing home improvement projects and all kinds of things. And it led to this huge pile up. And there were a lot of problems that came from that. ETAs were out the window. We found all kinds of issues, and we were solving for all kinds of issues. And now the market has flipped, right? So now it's quite the opposite. Everyone is loaded up with all the stuff that they need. They're back to traveling, going to movies, going out to restaurants, and there's just not as much stuff moving around. Meanwhile, the market has loaded up with all the capacity, with the thought that the volumes that we saw a few years ago might be here to stay. And it's not the case. And that's provided kind of a perfect storm for what we're seeing now, and that's driven volumes down and led us to the issues that we're facing now. And I think, Kevin, I want to get your thoughts on this, but while certainly there's relief from the problems that we saw 2 years ago, there's not full-on relief, is my take. It's there is no such thing as utopia in freight. There's no such thing as a panacea in freight. There's no such thing as freight without problems. The problems just change with the market is my take on things. And we're certainly seeing that here today.
You're exactly right, Richie. Life and freight are both the same. It's always problems. You're always having problems. You can choose your own problems in a lot of respect, and that's what you have to do in freight is to do that. Choose your own problems. We have a whole set of other problems, and you said there's no utopia, and it's really like a pendulum that overcorrects. That it doesn't really hit the middle all that much. It's either you're overshooting on the upside, overshooting on the downside as well. And that's what you find. And that's what we find here in the freight recession. We're overshooting on the top side where a lot of things could be swept under the rug because you're having record years, right? We'll worry about it later. Now with razor thin margin, overcapacity out there, it becomes not cost of doing business. It becomes a real issue and put under the magnifying glass. And that's what we're seeing out there in a whole host of things, and certainly security, visibility, the deliverables to your customers. That's a big issue for everybody right now in logistics.
I feel like that pendulum is picking up velocity. Right. I feel like it's going faster and maybe further from side to side. Right. Where in the factors leading to that are, you have the Amazon Prime effect where everybody wants everything now. And that certainly puts a lot of strain on things. And then also there's the fear of, oh, my goodness, I don't want to go through what we experienced in the pandemic again. Right. And so there's various factors. And then you have global factors such as nearshoring, potential economic uncertainty. I think all of these are making those pendulum swings a little faster, a little closer, and a little further to the extremes. And that's not a comfortable situation to be in.
Yeah, we take both these bullet points, inflation, economic recession. We're in a high interest rate environment that we haven't seen in a couple decades. So there's a lot of managers out there, a lot of companies who haven't had to navigate these waters. So there's a lot of unknowns in that respect. And then nearshoring and reshoring, right? It's something that is a long process. It's going to take a long process to play out. So we can talk about it every single day. It doesn't mean that we speed up the process any, because we are taking supply chains out of certain countries and putting them in others. And you have to build factories, manufacturing plants, distribution centers. You have to have also the labor force trained up, and then you have to have the supply chain. You have to have those transport networks in place, and that takes decades to do. But that is a whole new world for everyone as well. You had to rush to Southeast Asia back 30 years ago. Those were navigating those waters was difficult. Coming back to nearshoring and reshoring is going to be a lot of unknowns out there, and it's rough seas no matter how you look at it.
For sure. And like you think about kind of the macro, like I feel like what we're talking about right now is kind of at a high level, like pretty macro in nature, and that here's some of the big, heavy winds that are blowing in the marketplace and the big swing of the pendulum. But when you think about how this is impacting things in a day-to-day, manner, like what's happening in the real world at a micro level, trucking companies they're having a hard time. Like their margins are thin right now. The rates, and there's so much capacity on the road, the rates are on the floor. So now, loads and runs that could have been making big money a few years ago, now these companies are barely over breaking even. And meanwhile, you got to put food on the table. You got to make ends meet. And I feel like that drives people to be more creative in their income streams. When you talk about diversifying your portfolio, when you think about that, how do you do that when you're a small carrier? You get creative with how you can make money. And some of that may not be legal, just to put it out there. And so that's leading to, we've seen this massive spike, 600% in cargo theft. You're seeing more strategic cargo theft, apart from just stealing a trailer or emptying a trailer. People are rerouting truckers, calling truckers and posing as the shipper to tell them to go to a different place. We're seeing a lot of fake MCs. You're seeing companies like Highway, what they're doing with sorting out, MC numbers and bad actors and double brokering. And we're certainly seeing a lot of kind of nefarious consolidation or transloading as well, where there's extra space in the back of a truck, and a trucker may decide to fill that with an LTL load in the middle. This type of activity and behavior is, I don't know if I can back this up with data, but I'm sure that it's not far off from an all-time high. And that's kind of the core of the problems that we're facing today. Whereas, 2 years ago, it was more ETAs. Where's my stuff? Why is it late? Getting hit with all these fees. Can't get product quickly enough. The shelves are empty, etc. Now it's, why is all of our stuff going missing? Where can I find it?
You're exactly right. You take 2 years ago, and theft was, I go back to the cost of doing business. It was, you're trying to get as much capacity. There's a surge in load volumes. Doesn't matter. We'll sort it out in the end. We're having a record quarter. It doesn't matter if something gets stolen. I won't say it doesn't matter, right? But the urgency isn't there like it is today, where each of these thefts, each of these incidences are looked through under the magnifying glass. It's under the microscope, because when times are leaner, you start realizing kind of some of your inefficiencies, some of your issues, and you worry about that. And again, I don't know if cargo theft, if double brokering, if all the fraudulent activity out there, I don't have any data to say it's X more, but it certainly feels that way. And what I will say is being talked about a whole lot more now than really it ever was. And I think some of those activities and some of those players, those bad actors, they've kind of morphed and changed into more organized, kind of more organized crime. And that's something that I hear about from my conversations with 3PLs all the time, is this feeling and this organization that theft and these rings of companies and individuals are doing. So it is. I mean, we're in a lean time. It means that everything that does go wrong is magnified, and solutions are looked for.
Yeah, I think about almost like a boxing match, right? Like it's almost like taking body shots early in the match, right? Like, and when you're fresh and you're full of energy, you're George Foreman versus Muhammad Ali, like back in the day, and you can just, maybe that's the wrong analogy, right? Because it's the body shots that start wearing on you, right? The ones that land, you can kind of absorb them, when your profits are through the roof. But now, as consumer behavior has come crashing back down to normality, if you will, or pre-pandemic normality, like You don't have the big, massive influxes of cash and sales to offset the pain points. Those pain points become much more acute, and now what do you do? And at the same time, it seems like theft is on the rise at the same time. So those body shots are getting to be a little bit more severe.
It is, and I go back to Warren. Oh, sorry. I go back to Warren Buffett's famous quote: you never know who's swimming naked until the tide goes out." So when times are great, you can cover up a lot of things. The water, the high tides in, no one sees anything. But when the tide goes out, you realize that you do have these issues, and now is the time to take action against them.
And it's I think with rates being a lot lower, shippers should be likely under budget, right? Like, okay, we're not facing these insane rates that we saw a few years ago where our budgets were just completely shot. Granted, to your point, we could cover it up with all the increase in revenue, but now the revenue's back to normal. We're under budget, but at the same time, we're having problems. Like, it's not perfect. There are still big issues, and like the dollar figures that some of these companies are reporting that it's being stolen are just outrageous, and so there's got to be some sort of way to be better in both environments, right? Like, there's no panacea, there's no way to be perfect. We can't get rid of all the problems. Anybody that says we can, no. I don't think there is such thing as a problem-free environment in this market, but I think that we can be better prepared. It's like being in a boxing ring, right? Like, you can't be in a boxing match and not get punched. There's going to be punches, there's going to be risk, but there's a difference between getting blindsided and being punched in the face and you never saw it coming versus seeing that punch coming and being able to roll with it and take it and minimize the effect or minimize the impact and rebound quickly. And I think that's where doing some smart things, to build some resiliency can play a big role. Whether it's diversifying carrier networks so that you're not completely reliant on one person or one company, to having good data to benchmark carriers' performance, not only on tender acceptance and on-time delivery, but how are they handling freight? And then also maintaining good visibility of your shipments while they're in transit. You need to know what's going on with your freight while it's being moved today more than ever before. And I think it's good to take these things into consideration, and understanding that, your overall solution or your overall security solution, your visibility solution, whatever it may be, is only as strong as its weakest link. And understanding the links in the chain that are allowing you to move freight as effectively and efficiently as possible is crucial to making sure things go as smoothly as they can.
Yeah, and it's not about wholesale changes in a lot of respects, right? It's those incremental improvements. There's improvements that take oftentimes the least amount of effort that give you the biggest results. And protecting yourself, and these 3 bullet points are great for that, right? To diversifying your portfolio of carriers, so your vendors, and accountability, and also visibility. Those things that you can do today, you start making those incremental improvements that is going to protect yourself, which is all about resiliency, right? Flexibility, resiliency, and the supply chain is really about protecting yourself against the highs, the problems that come with the highs and the problems that come with the lows, right? They're two sets of, at least they're looked upon in 2 different looking glasses, right? Those problems, sometimes the same problem, it's just your different perspective on the importance of that. But having that diversification, have that resiliency, having that those together, just builds that robustness of a supply chain that what they call anti-fragility, right? You don't want a fragile supply chain. You don't want a fragile transportation network. I think it was Nassim Taleb about Black Swan, right? You want that anti-fragility. And that's important, especially in times like this.
For sure. And awareness comes with that too, right? Like you have to
Yes.
increase your awareness. Like what is your shipment awareness? Do you have systems in place and technologies in place that alert you when something unexpected happens? The earlier and the quicker you can find out about an unexpected event, whether it's a theft, whether it's something that's being rerouted, whether it's an impact, whatever the situation may be, the quicker you're going to be able to respond immediately and effectively, right? You don't want to learn about a problem 8 hours after it occurred or 6 hours after it occurred. If you can find out about it that moment, flexibility and speed to a resolution, greatly increases, and better outcomes are on the way.
Yeah, in business, it's all about velocity. Whether you're in sales, it's that communication velocity. Communication velocity transfers very well into the supply chain operationally. You said it, Richie, that you don't want to 6-8 hours, maybe 6-8 days sometimes after an incident occurs. You don't want to find out about it. It's about velocity and building those tools in your network for your network that increases that velocity of reporting, that velocity of knowing what's happening. And visibility has a lot to do with that. Is kind of that entry point, right? You have to know what's happening before you can take steps to fix things, to address things, to pick up the phone and be a high velocity vendor to your customers as well.
All right, gentlemen. All right. Well, quite aside from that memorable quote from Warren Buffett, one of the notes that I took was something that Richie said, that there is no such thing as a problem-free environment. Well, that's a sobering view, but certainly a truthful one. And you guys just gave us some terrific information about how we can prepare for that sort of thing, the resiliency that we need to build in to our supply chains. Well, the questions are coming in now from our audience, and I urge the audience to continue sending in your questions. But before we get into those questions, I want for us, Richie and Kevin, myself, to sort of drill down just a little bit deeper into the material here. And moderator's prerogative, I get to ask the questions. The questions I drafted, I sort of had one or the other of you in mind, but I welcome each of you to answer them. Nevertheless, I want to start with Kevin initially. Kevin, in your view, how do the biggest risk factors in today's supply chain compare to what we were worried about a few years ago in the height of the pandemic? What would you say?
I mean, I would say that, thanks, Russell. I would say that some of it is about the double brokering and fraud, that is really, that's really an issue right now. And also, the robustness of supply chains. I think that's a big issue right now is exactly how to go about doing it. I think during the pandemic, there's a lot of lip service to it. A lot of people trying to sort it out in real time, but now that real time is over and we have the 2020 hindsight, is that no one wants to experience that again. No one wants to go through that confusion and that chaos once again. So at least for now, everyone is being proactive in really setting up supply chains, and part of that's nearshoring, part of that's better security, more visibility, to protect them against something that chaos happening again. So I think that's an important thing.
Rich, I have a question for you, but first of all, do you have a view to what Kevin just talked about?
I think the one thing I'll say is that it's possible to feel contradictory things at the same time. And I feel like a lot of people are still relieved that the problems of 2 years ago have kind of dissolved. At the same time, they're feeling the pressure and the anxiety and the stress of the problems they're facing today. And so which one carries more weight, I don't know. It probably varies from person to person, but I think that it's possible to feel both of those things kind of simultaneously or experience them both from day to day. That'd just be my one thought there.
Good thought, though. Good thought. Richie, let me just stick with you for just a moment here. Tell us, why should shippers be concerned about low rates in a freight recession? Some of them might think that's counterintuitive. I mean, wouldn't a soft market benefit them? Well, what do you say? What do you tell them?
Yeah, you think about it, it's too good to be true, right? And so when rates go down, and certainly it helps things in the near term, but you see all these other problems crop up, right? And depending on what type of cargo is being moved, if there are things that are being put in the back of that truck that could be giving off some sort of off-gassing that is problematic for the freight that you're moving, you have no visibility to that. That's happening. The cargo that you're moving is being damaged while it's in transit, and you have no idea that this is occurring. That's a big, scary thing to have in the back of your mind as a shipper. And then also theft in general, going up higher and higher and higher. People in the LTL space, there's a sign off for a certain number of pallets, but in reality, there's one pallet missing. It could be a whole truckload of cargo. We have a customer that our light sensor on the device caught light alert, a spike of light that was happening, and we caught a theft in progress where they were emptying out an entire trailer for over $400,000 worth of product. That sort of stuff is happening way more frequently than people realize, and certainly in companies that are still working off of JIT, that can be super problematic. So I think theft is a very real thing, and is becoming more of a thing to be concerned about as rates are going down lower and lower and lower.
Kevin, any thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, Rishi summed it up pretty nicely. But yeah, there are these issues that, well, when you talk about low freight and low rate freight environment, that means sales are down for the shippers, right? And your cheapest rate, or you're in a cheaper environment, these problems crop up of more theft, more issues, more cutting corners, because you have razor thin margins in trucking. So people are cutting corners, which means more damaged goods, right? Not even fraud, but more damaged goods, things that aren't really kosher.
Well, now you've anticipated my next question, Kevin, and that is to talk more about cost cutting, corner cutting that we see carriers doing, and how that impacts shippers. So if you would, let's drill down. I want to ask both of you to address that, but let's drill down into that. Just how difficult or how much of a problem is that for shippers today? What do you say?
It's a huge problem because, as you said, razor thin margins. A lot of carriers are just going to be unprofitable during the cycle, and hopefully they have enough cash available to make it through, because it's a boom bust cycle, as we see in trucking. But that brings on that corner cutting, right? Whenever you can cut out costs as a carrier, you're going to do that, and oftentimes that is a detriment to your service. And part of that service, certainly perishables. I think Richie probably has some concrete examples for this that are going to be good. But just take perishables. So take security. Take all sorts of factors. Hiring the right people. And you just mix all those together, and what you have is a lot of opportunities for things to go wrong, and go wrong not just because of normal accidents, but because of that cutting corner type of mentality that a lot of carriers have to operate. I won't say have to operate with, but naturally operate with whenever you're losing money or breaking even during the cycle.
Richie, this is clearly a very, very important area there. So I want to get your thoughts on this as well. Corner cutting, cost cutting. Talk to us about just what the impact of that is, the negative impact that is on shippers. What do you say?
Yeah, we have a 24/7 monitoring team here at Tive, and I've been talking with the leader of that team about some of the trends that they've been seeing. I probably ask him this question every week, like, what are you seeing? What's going on? What are you catching? And then also in conversation with customers, both on the shipper side and the broker side, about what they're experiencing. I spoke with a broker who said that it was a carrier they've worked with for years for reefer freight, and they caught them setting their reefer unit. It should be on continuous, and they were moving it to automatic. Or there's been instances where they've turned it off entirely. Why would a trucker do that? Well, they're using less gas. They're saving fuel. I mean, this is where we're at. Their ability to say, you know what? There's enough insulation back there. No one will know about it. It's going to be fine. It's going to show up cold. I can, change this setting. I can turn it off altogether while I'm sitting here in this lot, and I'm going to save a little bit of fuel and save a little bit of money. Like this, these are the types of justifications and things that are happening. And, in the trucker's defense, they're probably not aware of the damage that can do. Especially if it's, depending on the sensitivity of the freight. Same thing if there's, I was on a call with a broker, and they got a light alert on their phone while we were having a conversation. And they said, oh my goodness, like, I just bought this trucker lunch. I'm paying him dedicated money. It's a half truckload. I'm paying him dedicated full truckload money. I just bought him lunch 2 hours ago, and now I see that he's stopped and there's a light alert and the trailer's open. He's filling up the other half of that truck to make more money, even though I'm paying him over market. I'm paying him dedicated money, and he's still feeling compelled to go try to find extra money, during that load. These are all big concerns, whether you're a broker or a shipper. And we're not even getting into outright theft yet, which is also on the rise. And so I think the market being what it is, you have to know that these things are happening. And it's kind of like cockroaches in your kitchen, right? Like, if you find one of these instances that are happening in your network, it's like seeing one cockroach in your kitchen, and then you call the pest guy and he says, hey, I hate to tell you this, but you got about 20,000 cockroaches living in your cabinets. And now you have that awareness, and that's an uncomfortable feeling, but at least and you can go about fixing it. I think it's kind of the same thing here, in that when you see one of these examples take place, it's probably happening in your network more than you want to realize, or more than you're comfortable with.
Well, thanks for that Stephen King nightmare scenario of 20,000 cockroaches in my kitchen. Kevin, I know that you are looking at this at Brush Pass. You're looking at nearshoring, the surge in nearshoring. You're looking at cross-border movement and just what risk they impose for folks. So walk us through that. What's your view? What's going on there?
There's risks to reshoring, nearshoring. You take financial risks, but if we talk about transportation risk, you're operating in a whole new political structure, oftentimes a whole different culture itself, a whole different physical terrain. So there's a lot to take into account for that. I know a lot of people are coming out of Southeast Asia. Mexico is booming right now. I talked to my friends down on the border, and Laredo's basically full capacity. They're building a couple other bridges down there, but it's gearing up, I would say, for a perfect storm of the whole gamut again of theft and fraud, and also that limited capacity environment that is almost like pandemic style. So I think if everyone rushes in at the same time on the nearshoring, especially in Mexico, you're gonna have a lot of issues like we saw in the pandemic, where you have just this surge of demand with very tight capacity. So certainly watching that, number one, and part of that is the security risks that the supply chains face whenever you're moving across borders, is that political risk, that terrain risk, that fraudulent risk, and also the capacity risk. And that capacity risk, whenever there's tight capacity, there's usually bad decisions being made by shippers. Some of that is FOMO, or fear of missing out. Some of that is cutting corners themselves. And we were talking about cutting corners on the carrier side. Shippers are as guilty as carriers when it comes to cutting corners. And we saw a lot of cutting corners during the pandemic. And we're seeing some cutting corners on that, on vetting, on making sure that all their systems are in place, procedures, technology, to be able to really maximize the efficiencies of that.
Richie, you may have some views specifically on what shippers are doing in terms of creating risk for themselves, but also in terms of a surge in nearshoring and cross-border movement and creating risk. What's your thought there? Any views?
Well, I think anytime you're charging into newness, there's the unknown unknowns, right? There's the risk that you don't see, that you have to experience, or that may be seen or may not be seen, or may not be on the radar, and one that I think some companies may recognize, but others may not. I'm not sure, but you have the combination of nearshoring along, and then you pour on top of that, the ESG goals and wanting to be more sustainable and wanting to be more green. And a lot of times that means let's pull the intermodal lever more than the truckload lever, so that we can, go grab those credits, because there's going to be less emissions, per load in intermodal versus truckload. Now there's tools out there that allow people to measure that. So now you can report on it. So now you have nearshoring and more production in Mexico, and that allows for a cross-border intermodal move, which is, everything sounds great there. You're saving money, you're saving carbon, but now you have freight that's sitting on the rails it makes it a big target. I think bad actors are probably licking their chops a little bit, knowing that there's going to be more and more freight sitting on rail cars that are easy targets, so to speak. And so along with these changes and these moves, as there's certainly benefits, and that's why they're happening, but the risks need to be understood and guarded against at the same time. So I think those are considerations that should be taken into account.
Just want to tell the audience that we're going to get to your questions in just a moment, and continue sending them in, if you will. Thank you very much. Richie, I was jotting down some notes during the presentation. I think we can say there are three big threats: a down freight market, global recession, and cargo theft. That 600% increase is just absolutely frightening. So the question I would put to you is this: what is visibility's role in addressing all of these three threats? What would you say?
Well, all of these are three big punches coming from the opposing boxer of the market that you're in the ring with. Visibility allows you to see these punches coming to you, so that you can roll with them, try to dodge them if you can, and interact with them in the best way possible. Certainly, you don't want to catch all these punches out of the blue. They'll knock you out, and then you learn about them 6 hours later when you wake up. So I think, and then more specifically, having that awareness of where your freight is located, and then what's going on with your freight. Are there excursions and alerts that are happening in the temperature that could signal that a carrier has moved their reefer unit to automatic or turned it off, altogether? Are there light alerts happening where there shouldn't be, signaling that, truck, trailers or containers are being opened in places where they shouldn't be, whether for theft or consolidation, either one? What's going on with the impact, especially in LTL space? How is your freight being handled? Are there instances where it's being mishandled or dropped, and to what degree? And is that consistent with damage for the freight that you're moving? Being aware of these things in the moment they happen, the moment they occur, is crucial. That allows you to adjust accordingly. It certainly helps with the claims process, but also if you need to arrange a reshipment, if you need to contact the driver to fix a scenario before it goes bad, there's a number of things that can be done, whether it's saving a shipment or expediting the fix, so to speak. All of which are very important. It allows you to not absorb the full brunt of these instances, but roll with the punches, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Kevin, there must be something that we haven't touched on, something that shippers can do, something else that they might do to protect themselves against the unique risks that we've been discussing here today. What would that be? Walk us through that.
Yeah, I think Richard was talking about visibility. Everything is visible here. And I talk a lot about intel. In my normal day to day, we gather intel, information, data, and that's important. We were talking about incidence levels, but the meta level as well, to inform, learn from your past, right? And that's what visibility gives you the keys to. Visibility gives you the intel to be able to build plans and build systems and just build everything out, really, to avoid those problems in the past, so history doesn't repeat itself. And you take physical on the ground data, you take the intel that you can find through great information that is out there, kind of more on the 30,000 foot level, and you combine all of those along with some great human intel that you get through the vetting process of your carriers and other transportation vendors. And that's where really powerful decisions can be made, right? That's where you can adjust this. You can get into that incremental improvement, because if you can do something today that improves performance by 5%, 10%, that I think that's more valuable than huge changes. Talk about nearshoring, moving manufacturing, things like that take years and take a ton of capital investment. And it might get you, 50% improvement, but there's a lot of risk of that, and there's a lot of time. But if you can do something today that improves by just marginally, and you keep doing that day by day, each and every day, you're going to improve tremendously over the course of a year. And it's usually pretty low risk things that you can do. But it's all about visibility. It's about gathering that intel. It's about having powerful data to make good decisions.
Richie, we're going to get to the Q&A from the audience in just a moment. So very, very briefly, do you have anything to add to what Kevin just said about the visibility and its role in helping to address these unique supply chain risks?
I love what Kevin's saying. It makes me think of, this idea of being micro ambitious, being ambitious in the very small short term, and it's easy to get caught up in these grandiose plans of, if only we can do XYZ thing, it'll fix all of our problems. And we get focused on some sort of concept of utopia. And that can be a dangerous mindset to take on, versus, the idea that the direction that you're moving as an organization is more important than the position that you are in as an organization, regardless of how good or how bad your position currently is. If you're moving in a positive direction and making those small incremental improvements, that is the goal. That's the ambition, versus trying to obtain a certain status or a certain position that you create. Because you never, like, it's an infinite game, right? Like, you never reach a position, like an actual position, when you're just controlling your direction, but your direction keeps getting better and better and better. And which is bettering your overall position, right? So I think that is key, having that mindset of constant improvement and constant bettering is really important, and visibility certainly plays into that mindset.
All right, gentlemen, great stuff. A terrific drill down. I think, quite frankly, that's where some real value lies in today's presentation. But the questions are now coming in, and again, I urge folks, continue sending your questions in. Any we don't get to, they will answer offline. Here's one. Either one of you can take this question, or both of you. Questioner says, a common thread here is protecting margins, but bringing on a real-time visibility tool must involve some upfront cost. I guess this is the money question. How do you prove the ROI? Great question. What do you say?
Yeah, I think you have to understand the nature of the problem and what the problem is costing you first and foremost, right? I think wrapping your head around, and not just the immediate but what are the downstream implications in terms of the true size of the problem from a financial standpoint? And then you can look at what the solution is going to cost and make sure that it's worth your while. Certainly the technology is such today that there is a strong ROI for a lot of types of freight. But to be honest, there are some, solutions out there that may not be the best fit for certain types of freight. And so, you want to have that frank conversation with doing the math of the financial size of the problem versus what the solution is, whatever technology that you want to onboard to lessen that, and understand what that's going to be able to provide and run that math accordingly. But yeah, God and the devil live in the details, right? So you want to be pretty thoughtful with that math.
Kevin, any thoughts?
Yeah. ROI is always a special thing, isn't it? Right? Yeah. It's easier to quantify all the direct costs, right? And you build an ROI with that. But what we often ignore are all those hidden costs, right? The time that the current problem takes from productivity of your current employers, the limits on growth of your organization because of these hidden costs, right? Certainly the loss of a customer, the loss of the opportunity to gain new customers kind of goes back with growth. But the loss of customers, there's a lot of hidden costs in any supply chain that never really get painted a full picture because of the lack of intel, the lack of awareness of that. But if you add in those hidden costs to an ROI, that's the best case scenario. Sometimes those are hard to quantify, but they're always important to at least list out and just say, what if we had full productivity, right? We're not wasting 10% of our time chasing this around. What would we be doing with that 10% of our time? And if that includes bringing on new revenue or the opportunity to be able to handle new revenue, then you add that into your ROI. So it can get a little bit abstract and complicated, but if you just think about those hidden costs and try to build that into your ROI, that paints a much fuller picture of the benefits of implementing anything, and visibility being one of those.
So many good questions are just flowing in here. I like this one. Any particular industry that is experiencing a surge in cargo theft? And I guess the unasked part of that is this a problem just generally across the board? What do you say, gents?
I think we're seeing that it is a problem across the board. Certainly, types of freight that are easy to resell are big targets. So, think about big name brands, whether it's apparel or jewelry or electronics, cell phones and sneakers and things like this are huge targets because it's easy to turn around and resell these on eBay or Facebook Marketplace or whatever and offload and get rid of it and turn cargo into cash is easy. But that being said, we're seeing theft on a number of things. We're seeing food theft. We're seeing light alerts where there's consolidation happening on virtually every type of freight, and consolidation meaning that companies are wanting to cover up or fill up the rest of a truck. We're seeing that in the pharma space. We're seeing that in food space. We're seeing that in industrials. Almost across the board, we're seeing a lot of companies, a lot of instances where truckers are wanting to make that extra buck. So there's kind of a long answer there, but it's a little bit of everything, but there's certainly more instances in certain areas than others.
Let me just jump to another question because we're definitely running out of time and we got so many questions here. Can you offer any examples of specific anti-fragility measures that have effectively mitigated the impact of cargo security issues? So they want some specificity there. What do you say? Either one of you.
I could take a shot at it, Kevin. I feel like you might have something to say about anti-fragility, but as far as cargo security, having a light sensor on an IoT device to know when and where doors are opening allows you to be aware of those events. And if that's happening at a place and a time where it shouldn't be, that allows you, that gives you that awareness where you can get the proper parties involved to try to stop a potential theft from happening. So that's, having that set up on an excursion or an exception or alert basis frees up your time where you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to stare at a screen. You don't have to make 1,000 check calls. You don't have to stress, but still you're going to be aware the moment that something happens. So that gives you some resilience without having to constantly be stressed while something sensitive is in transit. Kevin, do you have anything else there?
Yeah, you have your physical, your vetting process, right? And having software and tools in place to verify that who you're dealing with is actually who you're dealing with, kind of upstream from shipments and in motion. So I think having both tools, right, those redundancies and anti-fragility is all about the redundancies. So having a pretty strict system in place in each chain of custody means that, you have those redundancies in place. It means that it's going to be anti-fragile. One thing can break down, but something else is going to catch it along the way.
Mm-hmm. All right, gentlemen, here's another specific question. They want some statistics, if you can give it to them. The question says, or the audience member says, given Mexico is a top nearshoring destination, nevertheless, it is a high security concern country. So how is visibility helping to address the security concern? And then they say, do you have any statistics to share on that?
Great question. And I wish I had some specific statistics that apply there. But I will say what we're seeing is companies that are like doing kind of A/B testing, right? And generating their own statistics based off of, accurate and robust data. For example, if they're moving freight from cross-border freight from, Mexico City to Phoenix or wherever, I'm just picking some random points here. There may be a number of different routes that can be taken, and so they may see various security concerns, light alerts, and stopping. You could set up geofences and see that trucks are stopping for longer than they should along certain routes than others, and they can start, understanding which one, which route is going to carry the least amount of risk. So that's more of a strategic application from a data standpoint. But I think that's a specific statistic that can be generated through these IoT devices.
All right, gentlemen, we're just about out of time. So I want to go to each of you now, starting with Richie. I want us to leave the audience with a great takeaway, something that they say, yes, I've got great information today, but this is the one thing I need to, to be working on, thinking about, doing something about. So the question, Richie, is this. We know what challenged supply chains today. We know what's going on. We know what challenged them in the past. But because there's uncertainty, we never know what's going to happen tomorrow. So what should companies do to be more resilient and prepare for what comes next? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I'll go back to what I said previously about, the true strength of your visibility solution, the true strength of your security, the true strength of your systems is really only the weakest link. And understanding the links in the chain for your visibility, for your tech stack, for your security, and being able to identify where those weak links reside and addressing those accordingly with technology or whatever it is to bring them up to speed. I think that's really important. And so, I think just understand that, your strength is you're only as strong as your weakest link. And the second thing is find out where your weak links lie and make some adjustments.
Kevin, briefly, what is the takeaway that they really need to have?
Yeah, it's all about those weak links. It's all about flexibility. Going through the pandemic, coming out of it, being flexible, being able to take a surge in volume and then ride out the recession that will follow. And is that placing those redundancies into the system, creating something that is anti-fragile, and that means looking at all those links in that supply chain and examining that, like Richie said, making sure that you don't have any weak links. And if you do build redundancies around there, it's all about anti-fragility and having a robust supply chain. And visibility is one of those keys. And knowing all the intel and all the data out there, getting your arms wrapped around it.
All right. Great information. Great takeaway, I must say. Folks, everybody who's watching here today, I want you to know that Tive is going to continue to be in contact with you. Look at your screen very carefully right now. An upcoming special report, cyber scams and high-tech heists, securing freight in the age of strategic cargo theft. You will want to read this, and it is upcoming. Subscribe to Supply Chain Brain, and it will be yours. All right, be on the lookout for that. All right, listen, I want to thank Richie Daigle of Tive and Kevin Hill of Brush Pass Research today for sharing their time and their expertise with us. And again, if we didn't get to your questions, and I see there's still quite a few, they will be answering them offline. Well, thanks not only to them, but a big thanks to each and every one of you for attending today. Well, this concludes our presentation. So until next time, Russell Goodman, Supply Chain Brain, saying so long.